Welcome to Phil's Sewing Virtual Club. My name's Cindy, and today we're going to show you how we use several serger applications using a 3-thread wave stitch, and we're going to use a 3-thread wave flat lock to insert the zipper on the back. So I'm excited to show you this. Let's get going. First thing we're going to do is thread our triumph for the 3-thread wave stitch. And I'm going to follow the quick reference threading guide. So we want to open our doors, put our selector down to threading, and then you're going to turn your hand wheel until it locks in place for threading. We're going to thread the lower looper first. And the lower looper just gets threaded as it normally would. Always give it a little snip to have some clean ends to put through the looper. Enter it into the L port, which is the lower looper. And there's our lower looper thread. I've got a woolly nylon in the upper looper, and the upper looper is going to be threaded a little differently. We're going to thread the lower looper through the O2 needle slot and then through the upper loop on our machine. There we go. I just want to give yourself enough slack. And then the needle, we're going to use the O2 needle, and since we've already got the upper looper in the O2 needle, we're going to use the O1 needle, and making sure our foot is up when threading this. And then we can use our needle threader to thread the C2 needle. Now we're all threaded. I'm going to give myself a little thread and push it towards the back. Now the next thing we got to do is check our settings. This on the stitch selector, we want that on B. We want our not overlap, but we want to do the wave, so we're going to select that up to the wave, and we're going to be using a lace applicator foot, which has got this guide to keep it from the blade. So I'm going to turn the blade down right now. My stitch width is going to be at 5. That's the widest, and my stitch length is down here, and I'm good. You can use anywhere from 0.75 to 2.5, but I'm going to keep it close together, and I'm going to keep it at a 1. So now that we're all threaded, I'm going to put it back in serging mode, close my covers, and now I'm going to change my foot. Got our foot, and I'm going to stitch off a little bit just to get this started. Okay, we've got that started. Now I've got my 2-inch strip cut, and I folded it in half just so when I go later on to use it, I know where the center is. But I'm going to put a decorative 3-thread wave stitch on each edge, and I'm going to lift my foot and advance it all the way to the needle, and then you just start sewing. This doesn't need to be a quick sew. Just take your time. You have this speed adjustment here on the front of the triumph. And I use that when I'm using specialty, just to keep it on an even sewing speed. Stitch right off, trim, and then I'm going to turn it around and do the other side. Advance my fabric. Kind of cut that little thread off there. And then continue with my 3-thread wave decorative stitch on the other side. This lace applicator is such a nice foot to use. It keeps it very consistent. Okay. Now we've got our 2-inch strip complete. Now we're going to set up for a chain stitch, and I just want to show you, this is my sample. I've got my 3-thread wave, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather this piece, and then I cut a bias strip of satin fabric, and that's about 1 1/4 inches wide. This is 2 inches wide. And we're going to gather them, and then we're going to sew them together on the sewing machine. But I just wanted to explain to you why we're converting over to the chain stitch. This is going to chain stitch and gather all in once. So let's get started threading. So what we're going to do first is open our covers and go to threading mode. Lift up my foot. And I'm going to remove the threads that are already threaded. I'm going to pull those out. Okay. Now the first thing we're going to do is remove this upper looper, and we're going to move the lower looper over to the chain looper. So I'm going to insert my thread into the chain looper on the antenna, and then we're going to thread through the chain looper here. I'm going to show you that there's a pre-tension guide here, and I kind of floss here to make sure it's in that tension guide. And now I can raise my foot back up, and we're going to thread through the chain looper with our decorative thread. I'm going to give it a little haircut. And your chain looper is going to come out over here, right here. Now we're going to use the C2 needle. So I'm going to have to remove my O2 needle and insert it into this C2 needle. And you're going to see that C2 needle through the window. Make sure it's all the way up, and then tighten it. Okay, so now we're going to thread our serger thread through the chain 2 needle on the antenna. And then we're going to come into the back guide into the C2 slot. And to thread our chain, we're going to have to put our threader all the way over to the chain cover and then thread the needle. Okay, now we are threaded. I've got this thread here caught on the, there we go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is check our settings for the chain. We're doing the center C2 needle. So our chain loop retention is 3 to 5. I've got it on 3. And our needle tension's 4 to 6, and I've just got it on 5. So we're all set. The next step is I'm going to remove the lace applicator foot, and we're going to use the cover chain foot. The cover chain foot is narrower and it's a little bit shorter. It does very well using the chain. Okay. Now I've got my, next thing I got to do is put my upper looper selector down, because when I do not need that, and then we're going to use our chain cover plate. So to remove this, basically pull that out, and we're going to insert the chain table. Okay, and our blade is also in the locked position. We're not going to need that blade at all. So I'm going to put it back into serging. If I turn my hand wheel, that upper looper is going to stay in the lowered position. Put my table up. Now with the machine ready threaded, what we're going to do is we're going to increase our stitch length to 4 and bump up our differential feed all the way up to 2, and that's going to help us gather. Now I folded my 2-inch strip in half, and this is the right side, so the decorative lower looper thread, chain looper thread, excuse me, is going to go on this side. So I want the pretty side down. So I'm going to follow my chain 2 needle position, and this is going to gather because I have my differential feed up and my stitch length all the way to the highest stitch length, which is 4. And this is something you just take your time. Okay, now this is the right side. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is take my 1 1/4 inch strip, which this is the right side, and I'm going to, since this is cut on the bias, it's not going to fray, but I want to gather this also right down the center. So I'm going to follow my C2 needle right at the center fold, and I'm stitching with the wrong side up, and this is gathering it. And now we have our white bias strip ready to be stitched with invisible thread on our sewing machine on top of the 2-inch strip. And that's how we're going to make the decorative ruffle for our pillow. Okay, on my pillow front, what I've done is I've used chalk, and I drew lines with the chalk at a diagonal starting at the corner, and then I put a line 3 inches over. So that's ready to put my ruffles on. So the magic of camera, we've already stitched down, and I'm using invisible thread in the upper thread, and I'm using embroidery bobbin thread in the lower, in the bobbin. So what I've done is I laid these strips on top of the lines, pin them like I did this one, right along that center. So I'm going to use a zigzag stitch with the invisible thread, and I use oftentimes my sewing machine and my serger for most projects. So, you know, it's just okay to use the serger and the sewing machine together to accomplish this. Now I'm using the zigzag stitch 1-09 just at the default, and I'm just going to center this and just stitch down the center. And stitch this one down. The next step after this, we'll just have to take our 2 back pieces. I cut 2 back pieces, and we're going to put in a zipper with the flat lock wave on the 2 back pieces. Put them together, stitch all around the sides, and our pillow will complete. So now we're ready to go to the serger. Now we're going to thread our serger to insert the zipper. What we're going to thread for is a flat lock wave stitch. Now this is a little different, so I'm going to try to take my time and explain this. The upper looper thread, I'm using a decorative Inspira bobbin thread, and the lower looper will be threaded just as normal. So I'm going to, okay, we're going to get ourselves. And sometimes this thicker thread, you have to just give it a couple times, but it does come through. So now we're going to thread for the upper looper. And the upper looper is going to be a little different. We're going to set it in the 02 needle pre-tension, and then the rest of it will be threaded through the upper looper port. So this is a heavier thread. Give it another haircut. Here's our upper looper. Now the next thread is our serger thread, and that's going to be threading the O2 needle. But it's going to go in the upper looper tension guide. And then we're going to come down, come across, and then thread the upper looper. Excuse me, the O2 needle. This will set us up for, we're going to make sure we're on overlock now. And the needle is now threaded. So we've got everything threaded now for the 3-thread flat lock. The next, what we're going to do is we're going to put our stitch selector on D, our wave selector up on wave, our stitch width to M, and our stitch length 1 to 2 depending on the weight of the thread. I'm going to go with a 1.5, and then we should be all threaded for our 3-thread flat lock for the wave. Now the foot we're going to use to insert the zipper is the cording foot, and our zipper is going to ride right in that groove for the cording. So I'm going to insert my cording foot, and I'm going to just stitch off just a little bit to get it going here. Okay, now we're going to get ready to insert the zipper. Now, first of all, I've got a 24-inch long zipper here, and I'm going to give myself plenty of room on each end. So first thing I do is mark with a friction pen where I'm going to start. And that's going to help me when I line it up for the second side. Okay, so I'm going to open the zipper. And we're going to want wrong sides together. So I'm going to wait for this piece later. So wrong sides together. And this you can tell on this. Some fabrics you won't be able to tell right side, wrong side. And this is right side. So what we're going to do is just turn this to the back. And I'm going to move my mark all the way up to the top. And then align the wrong sides together. And I've got my cording foot on. And I'm going to basically put my zipper. It's going to cut a little bit of that zipper off. So I've got my mark here. And I'm going to advance that, make sure that zipper is under that cord, and then lower my foot. Now I can start stitching. And you just want to hold the right sides together. Keep checking. You can kind of feel that cord of the zipper. Make sure it stays in that channel for the cording foot. stitch off. And trim your threads. Okay, now we've got our flat lock sewn. And what you're going to do is zip up the zipper and pull down your flat lock. It's nice and flat. It's nice and flat here, and look at the back of that zipper. Looks amazing, doesn't it? Now we're going to do the other side. Now I zipped it up and we're putting the second piece on. So I put the wrong sides together, so I know, and I've got my mark at the top of that zipper, and I've used these clips which are going to really assist me in keeping this straight. So the next step is to unzip the zipper. Because our flat lock, we're going to pull it flat, so we'll insert that zipper right in that coil. Wrong sides together. Just stitch off. Now I'm going to zip it up. Got a thread caught there. Get that out. I'm going to zip it up. Make sure I pull that flat lock flat. Now you've got your zipper all installed. We've got extra along the edge that will that we're going to cut off when we put the pillow together. So now we have our flat lock zipper installed. What I've done now is I've put a little tack here at the bottom of the zipper and cut it off. And at the top of the zipper, I'm just going to hold the teeth together, lower my foot, and I'm using a zigzag stitch with 0 length and 5 width. And just put it together, and I usually do 2 a little bit further apart from each other. And that will keep that zipper together. And now I can just trim this off. Now we're ready to put our pillow right sides together. But one thing that's very important, you should want to make sure that you open this zipper so that you'll be able to turn it. So I've already trimmed my ruffles towards the ends, and they all match. So what I'm going to do is make sure that when I put these right sides together, I'll use some of my clips here. I'm going to make sure that I have these ruffle pieces flat. So right under here, I want to make sure this is flat and it's going to be caught in the seam. So I'm going to clip each one of those to the back. And we're just going to go all the way around the pillow and clip it and then stitch it together. Now here's our completed pillow, and just to review what we've used, we used the lace applicator foot on the 2-inch strips and run it through this guide here to create the wave on the end. Then we switched over to the chain stitch, and we used our covered chain foot and created a little bit of a gather on that 2-inch strip. Then we used a 1 1/4 inch bias cut satin and stitched down with the gathered chain stitch on that also. Then we went to the machine and stitched down using invisible thread this to the top of the pillow. Next, we used the cording foot and inserted the zipper on the back using the 3-thread flat lock wave stitch. And that was all, it makes such a nice presentation, it makes a really nice pillow. Here's another example of using the wave stitch. I created a narrower strip on just a narrower strip of fabric and did a little bit different application on the front. I used the 3-thread wave flat lock stitch to insert this zipper. Here's another example, this weaving of the strips and with a decorative chain on the center of the strips. This also has the flat lock, 3-thread wave flat lock zipper application. There's so many things you can do with this. Here we use the lace applicator foot and created the 3-thread wave flat lock on this wine gift bag. Here's some examples of a narrower strip with a 3-thread wave and a chain in the middle. This is a good time of year to also play with fleece. This is a 3-thread using a metallic wave stitch on fleece. And look at what a nice little muffler that made. You can use it on linens. This turned out really nice with the decorative stitch with the 3-thread wave on the linen napkin. I hope you've enjoyed this video on showing you different applications of the waves on the sergers. We would like you to subscribe to our channel if you like what you see, like the video, and then ring the bell. If you need any of these products that we've shown in the video, please visit Phil's Sewing in Washington, Missouri. Until next time.